I'm incredibly excited to be here today. I'd like to thank the leadership of the WSA for inviting me to present this year, but also the WSA Chile team for inviting us to this most beautiful of places, a fantastic opportunity to come to Patagonia. I first presented at the WSA 5 years ago, and my wife asked me after the presentation, how did it go? And I said, I think it went well. I was maybe a little bit provocative and a little bit controversial, so I'm not sure they'll invite me back. But here I am, 5 years later. And so I will warn you that I tend to be provocative, and I tend to raise topics that are a little bit controversial. But I think in this audience, hopefully it will inspire you for the rest of this event. And I'm so excited to have an opportunity to connect with many of you afterwards as well. So for those of you who were not here 5 years ago, my name is Marcus East, and I've been very fortunate. Over the last 30 years, I've worked for some of the world's most iconic brands as a technology leader. And over that 30 years, I've been privileged to work at both sides of the digital transformation equation. On the one hand, I worked at companies like IBM and Apple and Google that were creating the technologies that were disrupting the world. And so I know what it's like to be in Silicon Valley and to be one of the tech executives who's helping to drive the innovation and the disruption that is changing the world. And it's a very powerful feeling. It feels good to be in Silicon Valley and to be a tech executive. However, the other half of my career has had me working on the other side of that digital transformation, digital disruption equation, in that I've worked for legacy brands like Marks and Spencer and National Geographic that are being disrupted by the very same technologies that I was creating when I worked at Apple or Google. And so it's been interesting for me to see how the way in which technology manifests in the world really depends on how you as an individual are positioned. If you are a Silicon Valley insider, and that's a hat that I've worn for many years, then it feels good. But if you are not a Silicon Valley insider, it can feel bad. It can feel disruptive. So that 30 years has been, for me, an incredible journey. I sometimes pinch myself and say, how did the child of poor Jamaican immigrants find himself in the boardrooms of Silicon Valley? But the reality is, as much as I've enjoyed that journey, there is one thing that has given me the most joy. And the most joy has come from working with innovative founders. And that may surprise you. The most joy has not come from working for Apple or Google. It has come from working with innovators. And so after 30 years in the corporate world, I'm excited to say that I am leaving the corporate world behind, and I'm now focusing this next phase of my career entirely on working with innovators. And what I hope to do in the next 20 minutes or so is to inspire you even more than you're already inspired to think about how innovation can really help us to address the problems that we face. Now, Professor Dr. Brook, I think, said it very well in his opening remarks. We live in a really, really challenging time. We have problems that are affecting not only our ability to enjoy life, but our ability potentially to live on this planet. We're in a bad place in many respects. And my partners and I came together to create a new entity called Rainforest. And this statement here really explains what we're all about. You see, this is very controversial. And no disrespect to my colleagues in the front who are government officials, but it's my belief that it is not governments alone that will solve the world's most challenging problems. It is the innovators, the impact innovators, leveraging the power of technology and impact investing in partnership with those governments that will solve the world's problems. Now, hopefully I'm speaking here and preaching to the converted, and that most of you will probably believe that. But I can see on some of your faces that there's a little bit of cynicism, and so I'm going to explain in the next few minutes why I think this is the case, and how I believe that this next decade has to be shaped by entrepreneurs who are focusing on how we can deliver social and environmental impact. And Venture Forge has been created in order to support those sorts of entrepreneurs. 5 years ago, I talked about something I identified as the 10 technological forces. And what I said was that during the 2020s, I expected there to be an incredible change in the way in which we saw technology. And I talked about how things like AI and robotics and quantum computing and cloud computing would change this decade and the future trajectory of humanity. And in many respects, I was right, but perhaps I underestimated quite how quickly some of these changes would come about. Interestingly, after that presentation, some of you, and I recognize some of the faces in the audience, came to me and said, I don't think that we're going to see these things in the next 10 years, Marcus. I mean, AI, that's probably a long way out. Robotics, I don't think so. But the reality is that we are seeing the impact of these things. But why is this slide important to us? It's important to us because the biggest change that has happened since I presented this slide back in 2019 is that these technological forces are no longer the preserve of large corporations. These technologies are now at the fingertips of innovators. Now, many of you may not be old enough to know this, but when I started my career 30 years ago, I was working for IBM, and if I wanted to have access to computing resources, I had to fill in a form. I then sent it to a team. That team would then ring me and say, hey, why do you need a server? Why do you need an IP address? And maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, maybe I would get access to some server resources to build an application for something that I was working on. Imagine that, the world's biggest technology company at the time, and it was almost impossible for me as an employee to get access to computing resources. Here we are 30 years later, where it is now possible for somebody with a credit card to go into Google Cloud, for example, and fire up enough resources to run a bank without having to fill in any forms or speak to anybody. It's amazing. And so one of the reasons I think that it's important for us to think about these technologies is that they are available at the fingertips of innovators today. It is even possible now to get access to quantum computing resources. IBM and several companies in Silicon Valley are making available access to quantum computer resources via the cloud. I mean, unthinkable 10 years ago. So, isn't it exciting that we have a moment in history when innovators have at their fingertips access to unprecedented power? But what are we going to do with that power? And so today I'm going to talk about just a handful of things. I'm going to talk about how innovators are using the power of this technology to shape the environment. I'm going to talk about how some innovators are using it to tackle social cohesion, and obviously these are themes that we're going to see when we look at the presentations from our winners later. I'm then going to talk a little bit about both impact entrepreneurship and impact investing through the lens of a West Coast Silicon Valley insider. And then I'm going to end with a call to action, because I want to make sure that we capture this moment. We're at a unique time in human history. But I think, as Dr. Brooks said, it's very important that we acknowledge that there are some real problems that are being faced by the world that need us to take action. So I'm going to start with what I hope is an inspirational example for you, something that just talks to the power of technology to have a tangible and direct impact on life as we know it. This is my friend Topher White. Topher is a fantastic engineer from San Francisco. It's been my great pleasure to spend time with him. And I first got to know him when I was the Chief Technology Officer at National Geographic. And as many of you will know, National Geographic is an organization that also seeks to protect the environment. Topher, as an engineer, did something quite remarkable. He had spent some time in the rainforests of the world, and he realized that we were not doing a good enough job of protecting them. And as an engineer, he needed to use his skills to somehow solve that problem. He did something pretty remarkable. This device that you can see him installing on a tree is effectively a set of microphones and solar panels that are designed to listen to all of the noises that there are in a rainforest environment. And his belief was that if you could listen to those noises, you would be able to discern what was happening in that environment. And so those devices, which are called Guardians, he's had thousands of these devices installed around the world. And they take an audio stream, they process that audio stream, they identify anomalies, and then they send it via Google Cloud to his central model, which then identifies things such as a chainsaw being started or a gun being fired. Today, this technology is protecting tens of thousands of acres of rainforest around the world, including here in Chile. So that's just a quick overview of what it is that Rainforest Connection does. Let me run this short video, which hopefully will give you even more of an insight.
When you're in the forest, one of the things that really catches you off guard is how noisy it is. Sound surrounds you. That is the essence of the forest. If nature itself has evolved to use sound as the way to communicate through the forest, we should use sound as the way to monitor vast amounts as well. My name is Topher White. I'm the founder of Rainforest Connection. We're a nonprofit tech startup based in San Francisco. We're here right now in West Sumatra, where we're working with a local group to help put up Rainforest Connection guardians to listen to all the sounds of the forest and help protect them. We put them up in the tops of trees with solar panels, a powerful microphone. They listen to all the sounds of the forest 24 hours a day and pick out individual things that we're looking for. That could be threats like chainsaws, gunshots, motorcycles, logging trucks. You can't really see something that's happening over a hilltop, but you can hear what's happening there pretty well. There's a whole new era that's in front of us right now, thanks to the use of machine learning combined with bioacoustics. The same way the microscope allowed us to see things that we couldn't, listening to sound using machine learning will help us to understand what nature is saying that we never would have heard in the first place. These chips that have GPUs built into them can actually run pretty advanced machine learning to analyze audio as it comes in and decide whether or not it gets to be sent to the cloud. Sound is temporal, meaning that an hour of sound takes an hour to listen to, and so people really can't do it. But computers are fantastic at this. And then we use the same cell phone network to actually send that data up to the cloud to have it come back down to the people on the ground.
Jadi alat ini sangat membantu dan tidak lagi kami melakukan patroli bulanan. Di saat kami masih ada di rumah, alat gorden ini bekerja untuk mengirim notifikasi ke HP kami dan sehingga kami tahu.
The local ranger is protecting just a few square kilometers of forest. That has a truly outsized effect on climate change, equivalent to taking thousands of cars off the road. And so these are the people that we need to build technology for.
And so, of course, this is a very impressive example of where technology is being used to have a direct impact on the protection of our environment. So obviously, TOFA must be supported by organizations around the world that want to fund this activity. Last time I was with TOFA, we were at a party together in San Francisco with our partners. And it was a charity event, and this charity event raised something like, I think, $20 million on the night, which is typical in San Francisco. But TOFA was explaining to people what he was doing. And many people said, why aren't you building an app that you can become a billionaire from? Why would you waste your time doing this? That's what they said to this guy, who literally, today, is protecting the rainforest in 35 countries. He has had to go and do that himself. And so hold that thought, because we're going to come back to talk about what it means to know that the technology is available, the solutions can be built, but we need to find a way to scale up these organizations so they can be successful. So that's just one of many examples that I could share with you, a powerful example of technology being used. I want to talk a little bit about something different. Clearly, protecting our environment is a fundamental thing that we as a species have to do. If our planet becomes uninhabitable, then we're gone. However, we also have to think about the quality of life and thinking about ways in which we as individuals can have a life that actually is enjoyable. So technology clearly is a very important part of our lives today. We've never been more dependent on or more integrated with technology. My Apple Watch is connected to a very innovative health service called Forward Health. So bear with me while I tell you how it works. This device, together with my Apple Health app, together with the scales in my bathroom, together with my blood pressure monitor, send continuously 24/7 to my doctors a summary of my health. They can see my heart rate, my pulse, everything that's going on with me at any moment in time. My doctors will proactively reach out to me and say, hey, we've noticed that you haven't slept very well for the last 3 days. We think you should come in and see us. I mean, isn't that amazing that people are that comfortable with technology that they will allow their doctors to look into their lives 24/7. I was one of the first people to start using this service, but it is now rolling out across the United States, and it's very, very powerful. So there is no doubt that technology is an important part of our lives. My wife, who is much younger than I am, she's a millennial, she only consumes news from social media. She gets upset when I have magazines delivered. I have The Economist and the Harvard Business Review. She says, why do you keep getting these things? They just take up space. Everything that she does comes in social media. So it's no doubt that technology has been incredibly impactful in our lives. And we are bombarded every day with thousands of notifications. It's actually quite scary if you sit down with somebody in Apple or Google and you look at the amount of data that is projected into the minds of the average human being. It's terrifying. And at the same time, we have an epidemic of loneliness. Believe it or not, even in communities that are considered to be relatively cohesive, like the United Kingdom, there's a problem. During the pandemic, Google shared a lot of information about what people were searching for. And one of the things that people searched for the most was, how do I meet people? How do I meet people in real life? And you say, well, maybe that was a pandemic thing, so the pandemic stopped and everything went back to normal. Unfortunately not. Believe it or not, loneliness is something that is identified as a big problem now for around 50% of the British population. And these are people who are self-reporting that they are lonely, and one of the things that they desire is an opportunity to have in real life, IRL, for the younger people in the audience, connections. And so a team of entrepreneurs who had successfully built and exited a business decided they wanted to tackle this problem of social cohesion in the United Kingdom, and so built a platform called Click. And very simply, it is around this idea of communities of people that have shared values coming together, and it empowers these communities to build a small private space where they can connect and then hopefully meet in real life. How does it work in practice? I think this is staggering. This is just one of the communities that is supported on this platform. So this is not a joke, this is real. This community is called Girls Who Walk, and it is based in the city of Manchester. So Manchester is the second city in the United Kingdom, one of the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, a very sophisticated city. Somebody went onto this platform, Click, during its beta phase and said, I am a girl who likes to walk, but I feel lonely walking by myself. If there were other girls who would like to walk with me when I'm walking around Manchester, please join. Within a couple of weeks, she had 2,000 people who had joined up to this community, and her first event, 400 girls turned up. Why? Because they were lonely. These 400 girls felt they had nobody to talk to, nobody to walk with, and the opportunity to connect with other girls and to simply walk around Manchester was so compelling to them, they stopped everything and became members of this community. It's off the charts now. In fact, they have events on a regular basis, and hundreds of people come to these events. So once again, you'd think this is a fantastic example of technology being used to do something positive for humanity. So clearly the founders of this platform are getting lots of support to scale this up. Well, unfortunately, Nicola and Jason, the founders of this, when they approached the same venture capital firms who had funded their previous successful venture, a venture that they had exited, generating significant returns for their investors, the investor said, but where's the revenue? What's the advertising income here? How many notifications are we going to be getting from these people? What is the average revenue per customer? And they said, no, but this is about social cohesion. End of conversation. And this works. So this is an example, I think, a fantastic example of people using technology to do things that can have a positive impact on our quality of life. And we need to find ways to support this. So this leads nicely into hacking, impact entrepreneurship, and investing. And once again, I'm preaching to the converted in this room, but I know, having spoken to some of you are still maybe in the corporate world thinking about whether or not you might do something in the impact space. And so I'm hoping that this really inspires you to do so. I think we can all agree that impact entrepreneurship is really building new business models and new products that deliver not only financial returns, but also social, environmental returns. And I don't have to explain that to this audience. And impact investing is clearly delivering investment in a way that also supports social and environmental outcomes and impacts, as well as commercial ones. But there is a challenge. Even though it is a space that is growing, it is still not growing fast enough. The good news is that this is now a $500 billion space. So impact investing is approaching, in 2024, $500 billion of investment, which is fantastic. I mean, we should all be very happy and very excited about that. In the UK, 55% of people are reporting that they would love to be able to impact invest, but they don't know how to. There's no mechanism to allow people to easily invest money to support things like Click that are not necessarily going to be a multi-billion-dollar exit for somebody, but will have a very positive impact on society. So that's a remarkable change. More fascinating is that 55% of impact investments in a study that was done, and I've got all of the references in this document if anybody wants to see them, actually turned out to deliver better financial returns than purely commercial investments. So we need to start thinking about this. We now have a time when there's amazing technology, and we have a time when impact investing is actually generating better returns in many cases than traditional investing. And then the most interesting thing for me is that when interviewed, impact investors said in 88% of the cases that their investment met or exceeded their expectations. And if you compare that to venture capital, where maybe 1 in 100 of the things that people invest in are successful, you can see that there's a significant difference here. And so, why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you all of this because I have a call to action. It's my belief that, as Peter said, we're at a critical juncture in human history. We have got some real challenges. We're reaching a tipping point when it comes to global warming, climate change, when it comes to pollution. When I was at National Geographic, I spent a lot of time with the research scientists, and it was both inspirational and depressing. You know, they would tell me that, actually, Marcus, by about 2030, we won't be able to eat fish. And I would say, no, come on, that can't be true. Well, here's the data. By 2030, fish in our oceans will have so much plastic in their bodies that they will become toxic to humans. In fact, there are many people working for National Geographic who do not eat fish anymore. And if you don't believe me, go and do a search. All fish now contain a certain detectable amount of plastic within their physiology because elements actually accumulate within fish. They don't have the ability to expel them from their bodies. And so the science tells us at some point fish will become toxic. It's not a debate. Fish will become toxic. So we're at a tipping point. But the good news, as I said at the start of this presentation, is that the technologies available to us are at an unprecedented level of power. So we have the technology. And also, there is movement when it comes to impact investing. And so we can say that it is something that gives us hope that if we can take the technology that innovators now have access to, and we can find a way to give them access to the resources to scale up, we can actually tackle these problems. And so my call to action, very simply, is for you to acknowledge that this next decade has to be the decade of the impact entrepreneur. Take it from me as somebody that's been in the boardroom of a Fortune 50 company, that's worked in Silicon Valley for many, many years, who's seen what it's like to be in the corporate world. The corporate world is not going to solve our problems. I was also a politician when I was back in the United Kingdom. No disrespect, but politicians are also not going to solve our problems. Who's going to solve our problems? It is people like you. It is entrepreneurs who have the courage and the conviction to use their skills to tackle these problems. Obviously, we're going to see some fantastic examples of those over the next 2 days. But I hope that we see more, because it's my belief that the next decade has to be shaped by these people. It's the time for everybody to get involved. One of the things that I'm doing in creating Venture Forge is trying to find ways in which we can connect entrepreneurs globally to the sources of funding that will allow them to unlock their potential. My question to you is, what are you going to do personally to make sure that you embrace this opportunity and take the time to find ways to actually drive the change that we need for humanity? Well, I could talk about this topic for hours, but I'm going to save the last few minutes for questions. I think we've got some microphones coming around if anybody has a question to ask, but thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Marcus. And we have microphones if there's questions from the audience.
Thank you, Marcus. Always inspiring.
Thank you,
and
Dorothy.
Good to see you again. You kind of left a question hanging. You said TOFA was at a reception, and everybody said, why aren't you doing something that would make you money? So where is the money going to come from that's going to push impact investing?
Yeah, such a great question, Dorothy. Thank you. The quick answer is that one of the reasons that I've started talking about the impact of impact investing is that when I go and talk to the general partners of venture capital firms, for example, they all say, hey, our job is about making money, so we're not interested in impact investing. But then I show them some of the stats, and I show them that actually the returns can be better from impact investing, and suddenly it gets their attention. And so one of the things I think has to happen is that we have to bring more data about just how powerful some of the impact entrepreneurship that we see is. One of the ways in which I'm contributing to that is I'm starting at the end of this year a PhD to focus exclusively on looking at how new innovative forms of investment can actually be more successful in generating returns, not only for the investors, but also for society and for the environment. So I think it's really important that we don't give up and say, well, impact investing is over here in the corner. It's my belief that impact investing should be the primary form of investing. And I'm a limited partner for several venture capital firms, and I can tell you, let's take, I won't mention the name, but take one of the big venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. Let's say they raise $1 billion fund. They only spend about 8 days doing due diligence now when they deploy those funds because they're under so much pressure to deploy their funds, they're not looking in detail. Compare that to the due diligence that gets done around an impact investment. It's a completely different ballgame. And so we have to change the game, and I think that's how we're going to make a difference in this space. Happy to talk further about that.
I'm just going to, yeah, basically same question as Dorothy has. Very interesting and really interested in following up because the money has to come from somewhere and there has to be a revenue and somebody has to pay it.
Yes.
So I don't know if the shifting to the commercial due diligence is, you know, going to solve the problem. I run a company in Vienna that has investors because they say this is the green side and the sustainability side. It makes it really hard for us to deliver the good work because there has to be a revenue on it.
Yes.
And the public money is not so much about that revenue. So that is really important, very interesting topic, but yeah,
Yes.
I'm not really seeing it.
Yeah, well, let's talk more, but
yeah,
one of the, to give you a provocative thought to that, if you look at philanthropy over the last 30 years, philanthropy has failed. So actually, depending on which research you look at, they will tell you that all of the billions of dollars that have been plowed into philanthropy really haven't delivered the outcomes that people were hoping for, partly because there wasn't accountability. What's important is that when you look at impact investing, the difference there is that you introduce accountability, in that for an organization that has set itself the goal of achieving certain objectives, those objectives then become public and we can start to assess how they progress towards those objectives. It starts to look a lot more like commercial, traditional investing than it does philanthropy. And so my belief is that we actually shift from philanthropy to impact investing, and at the same time, we go to the big venture capital firms that I'm all friends with and say to them, hey, that $1 billion that you're literally going to deploy into hundreds of companies with not much due diligence, you could probably get better returns if you took 10% of that and you deployed it here with these organizations that will deliver some kind of income, but will also deliver social and environmental benefits. But the reason I'm doing the PhD is because when I talk to various experts in the field, they said nobody's actually gone and done the research that could prove to a general partner in a venture capital firm that that is the case. So that's what I'm hoping to do. But let's talk more.
Yeah, let's talk more.
We have time for one more question.
Oh, I'm really sorry. Another question. It's actually a comment on the subject you just talked, which I think is core of what we're doing here. The B Corp movement is exactly that, is that companies have to be not only sustainable from the environmental and social point of view, but can also have to be financially sustainable. Because at the end of the day, somebody has to be funding these philanthropic movements. So if all of entrepreneurs in alliance with governments, right, do more than what the government is asking and actually do the work of building a business that has purpose, right, and takes care of the people and takes care of the environment, then you fall into this virtuous circle. And that's what we're doing here in Patagonia and Patagonia Biotecnología and many other companies that work with us. And we have full support also in this region. So I think that, you know, some people have the ESG principles and they have their sustainability reports. Other people sign up for the B Corp movement. Chile, I'm proud to say, is one of the countries with more B corporations worldwide. So we're very proud of that. And, bueno, some of you heard me last night. Not being a Chilean, I was captivated by Los Lagos region, so here I am at the end of the world. So all of you visitors, watch out. You might just have to stay.
And a final point I make on that is I think we have a lot to learn from that B Corp movement in that thinking about that experience that Topher and I had at that party. I mean, $18 million was raised on that night. Literally, the people sitting in the room donated $18 million of their money via that event, but purely for philanthropy to an organization that was not necessarily going to deliver a real outcome. It was a very traditional, old-fashioned charity. Just imagine a world where you could have an event where you could get $18 million of impact investment funding for the sorts of organizations that you've talked about, the B Corps that are successfully sustainable from an economic perspective, but also delivering social and environmental impacts. That change only comes about with people like us in this room actually going out and sharing the knowledge and the expertise. And certainly one of the things that I'm excited about is to learn more about how Chile has been so successful in stimulating that kind of model. So thank you for your leadership.
Marcus, we have one last question over here.
Oh, hello. Hello. Yes, you hear me?
Hi.
Hello, Marcus. Thank you very much for that insight or for that wake-up call. It's not a wake-up call, actually, because many people have been out there doing that in a way. Actually, my question is more, you looked at the impact investing as, you know, as sort of as a label. But we have, since a couple of years in the financial industry, the ESG's requirements. And I work for a big corporate, and we have, you know, we're STBI, we're going the whole way. We can only get money, or we will get only money if we comply with ESG, which I think in a soft way, this is also a very strong approach.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that, where the ESG, where you see the ESG, how they support or how they actually driving to getting on the right track, and the impact investing? Because
yes.
I think
I'll give you a quick answer, but would love to talk further about this. Unfortunately, in the United States where I live, it has become very political. And so actually, ESGs and funds that support ESGs are under attack. We're actually in a place where it would not be impossible to see them really disappearing in terms of new funds in the United States because there is so much political pressure on them. I think part of the challenge is that we haven't been able to articulate the impact in a way that gets people generally in society supporting this, and also gets the people making the investments very, very excited about it. And I think what we have to do is really build on what we see as successful in the commercial space. We need entrepreneurs that have a very clear goal, who build organizations that are successful, to be able to articulate that clearly, and then to be able to get that funding in a way that allows them to say, we're delivering income, and we're delivering social benefits, and we're delivering environmental benefits. The challenge that I've seen with ESGs, particularly in North America, in the United States, is that for many investors, it's just a space that is considered to be politically motivated, and therefore not something that they will consider. But let's talk more about it, because I have some controversial thoughts.
Thank you so much, Marcus. I know there is more questions, but please find a moment to share at lunch or
Thank
any
you.
other moment during this experience together. Thank you so
very
much.
much.